Okay, here are a few notes on graphing the absolute value of x. And first of all, we just want to go through some basics and realize that the absolute value of x, y equals the absolute value of x, or f of x equals the absolute value of x, is a piecewise function. In other words, absolute value of x equals x if x is greater than 0, 0 if x is equal to 0, negative x if x is less than 0. Sometimes we write greater than or equal to 0 and combine these two ideas. Now if we wanted to just graph that and get an idea of what it would look like, it'd be very simple. We could just get our good old table of values and try a couple of points. I tried -1. Since -1 is less than 0, the absolute value, which is y equals the absolute value of x, would be the absolute value of -1. That would be -1 or +1. The absolute value of 0 is 0. And if x is 1, 1 is greater than 0. So the absolute value of 1 is just 1. So these would be my 3 points. So I could get out some graph paper, something like this. And I just plot these 3 points, -1, 1, 0, 0, and 1, 1. And since it consists of two lines, one slope is positive, one slope is -1, it's real easy to graph it. So you only really need 3 points to graph it. And it ends up looking like the letter V. And it's basic form, that's what we've got. Put these zeros out a little bit. So there's your absolute value of x. Now, the most general form is this form here, y equals a times the absolute value of b times x minus c plus d. This is important. So please note this. And this is what we have. This is where we have our horizontal shift. And that's going to be the same sign. So our horizontal shift is, opposite sign, because it's a negative. So whatever number is here, it's going to be the opposite sign, will be the horizontal shift. So the horizontal shift will be c. And we say opposite sign because there's a negative in there. And the vertical shift is the same sign. So here the horizontal shift is c. Here the vertical shift is d, same sign. And then these positions, a outside and b inside the function rule, or the absolute value sign, these are what we call dilations. This will be a vertical dilation. This will be a horizontal dilation. And depending on whether these numbers are greater than 1 or between 0 and 1, this will cause either a vertical stretch or compress or a horizontal compress or stretch. And they kind of work opposite. So you have to kind of go into that a little bit more detail. And we talked about that in class. We do have these other basic changes. If we have a negative in front, this reflects the graph vertically. So a negative absolute value of x would just be flipped about the x-axis. So it would be like an A. Now, if we put the negative sign inside the absolute value, okay, it flips it horizontally. So that means it's reflected about the y-axis. Well, since this is symmetrical to the y-axis, it ends up looking the same. So this really does very little. Now you can think of this rule, and I hope you've gone over this before, that the absolute value of a product is equal to the product of the absolute values. So it's the absolute value of A times the absolute value of B. That's one you want to be aware of. So if we saw something like this, the absolute value of negative x, we could write that as the absolute value of -1 times x, and we could write that again as the absolute value of -1 times the absolute value of x. And what's the absolute value of -1? That's just 1, so it ends up being 1 times the absolute value of x, which is just the absolute value of x. So see, it has no effect on it. It becomes the same thing because it's when we reflect this v about the y-axis, it's also a v. Okay? So those are some basics. So we're going to give you some examples in the next video, and you can try those and apply some of these, and we'll show you how we apply the horizontal, vertical shift, and then these little changes in the shape.